Hi, Anna. Thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Of course, yeah. Let me quick introduction. Anna Goraczko is a Miami-based visual artist who uses cyanotype photography to explore themes of body positivity, family history, and spiritual connection. Her ongoing series, Sense of Belonging, features life-size photographic blueprint portraits of people in larger bodies within natural landscapes, challenging societal biases and offering representation to marginalized communities. Goraczko earned a BFA in art in 2008 and an MFA in visual arts in 2020 from Florida International University. Her work has been featured in solo exhibitions such as Anna Goraczko at the Frank Gallery in 2023 and group exhibitions like the Chennai Photo Biennial 2023. Her work is part of the permanent collection at the Frost Art Museum in Miami. In 2024, Goraczko received the Artist in Residence Award at Deering Estate in Miami, where she will continue her Sense of Belonging project. Previously, she was a resident at the Hypatia-in-the-Woods Residency in 2022 in Washington and at StoneTriggerPress in New Mexico 2022. Goraczko has curated and co-curated numerous exhibitions, including Yiayia, Nana, Abuela, Grandmother in 2023, and Wet in 2023 as well. And she co-founded Tunnel Projects, a shared studio space in Little Havana, Miami in 2022. She also leads cyanotype workshops, including those at the Ancient Spanish Monastery and Aventura Library, both in 2023. Her work and contributions to the arts continue to push for inclusivity, representation, and connection across diverse communities. So Anna, thank you so much for being here again. And
Thank you, and thank you for that revised biography. I love
yeah,
it.
no, thank you for, I mean, yeah, no, it's just amazing. Yeah. But yeah, no, I just wanted, I remember I saw you at the Frank, so I was really excited just to have a chat and just to get you on the podcast. I was really excited to see you. And then you told me that you're currently working where again? Can you remind me? Can you remind everyone?
I am at the Deering Estate. I got awarded a second year of the Artist in Residence program, so I have a studio now at Deering Estate, and that's where I'm working out of.
That's amazing. That's really wonderful. Oh my God, I'm glad to hear that. So you'll be there for another year approximately, or how long are you going to plan to be there?
Yeah, it's for 2025, so at least through this year.
Oh, that's amazing.
hmm
Talking about residencies, I wanted to touch upon your experience at the rural Washington State in 2022. How do you think that influenced your perspective on the connection between body size and nature in your art?
Well, that residency is kind of where this project all began because I was looking at that place kind of as like as this place to connect to nature. Like I really wanted to get deep into nature and connect and being that I'm a city girl, it was like, oh, you want to connect? Okay, we're going to connect. And it was like not an experience in the very beginning that I was used to because I thought, it would just be like, oh, I'm going to arrive at this cabin. It'll be peaceful. And I was just like hit with like, oh, I'm out here by myself. Like,
Yeah.
what are all these sounds? Like, there was a mouse in my car at one point. I was like losing my mind. And but eventually like I had to just push through all this fear that was happening in the beginning from that and I just started focusing on the landscape, like where I was, what it looked like, because especially, being from Miami, like we don't have mountains, so I'm like, just looking at the mountains, looking at my surroundings, like how do I connect with this? And I just kind of pictured I looked at the mountain ranges and I was just like, wow, that's like a breast, or that's like hips, or like that's like a leg, like basically. And I just started to think about how that's what my body is. Like my body is curvaceous, like my body is just like those mountains. And to me, like that's where a point of connection started.
Mm.
And it just began to like continue to like I just kept thinking about that and like how I might not have felt that before and why, and so my first cyanotype in the series is a self-portrait of myself because I wanted to mimic that idea of like my curves being like a mountain range. So my self-portrait kind of kicked off the series. So like that residency really kind of helped me to find that connection to nature and to feel like I was a part of it.
Wow, that's incredible. That's amazing. And I've never been to that part of the what I guess I've been to yeah, I haven't been to that part of the United States. So it must be very different. Oops. It must be very different to to me, like you said, like the change between the city and the rural landscape is sort of very kind of extremely different. It's like opposites in a way. Very
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, and if you don't have someone who lives out there or like who like you're just kind of I was just like a lost puppy. Like I was just like what am I was very optimistic, but I was also like a little naive, I think, and that kind of helped actually because I don't think I would have done it if I knew how scary it could have been. But but no, in the long run, it was just like an opportunity for me to grow, right? Like just to get a new experience under my belt and like push through like all this new stuff coming up about my connection to nature. So, um, I kind of just went from being like this spectator to feeling more comfortable being in it.
Yeah, no, and th that sense of place that you sort of gain from just being elsewhere really kind of helps to sort of understand yourself and your identity and who you are, which it's like very introspective, but also very like kind of you become sort of aware of of the landscape and how different it is from, for example, Miami, which is completely different from other parts of the United States. Like I went to the Midwest and that was completely different, of course,
Right.
like yeah, both like literally and just like metaphorically as well. It's really interesting. But you did create this series of sense of belonging, and I really wanted to touch upon that as well, because especially in terms of like challenging the societal biases about bigger bodies, I was interested in knowing how that work specifically sort of puts forward that those ideas or those how that your work sort of represents those specific or how does it redefine societal standards about bigger bodies and things that nature.
Well, that project it just really for me made me think, okay, why haven't I felt a part of nature? Why haven't I um felt included, I guess? And for me, like I noted I'm a visual person, I'm an artist, like I'm constantly looking at what is being presented to me, like what images are being presented to me, especially in like marketing or, television, news, and to me, what dawned on me is like maybe I didn't feel connected because I never saw myself in an image
Mm.
like portrayed in nature. You don't really see bigger bodies marketed in nature. Like nature is always kind of marketed as this space for physical activity, fitness, and there's always like these thin people on like the pamphlets with the big backpacks and they're like doing these marathons, right? And which is nothing wrong with that. It's just in my mind I may have subconsciously been like, well, that's not a space for me because that's not something I would want to do.
Yeah.
But also, you know, in reflection of that, thinking about, well, where are the big bodies in nature visually? And you don't really see that. And so to me, it's a way, the project is a way to kind of show that and to show this, especially the stillness of the photographs, is just to be like we're like I'm here, we're here, we're taking up space, and in this way that's just kind of like affirming, and and also hopefully makes people question the same thing I question, which is why have I not seen big people portrayed in nature in a way that wasn't like you need to lose weight or you can't, I don't ever think I've ever seen like a person sitting by a tree just enjoying nature, as the way of like visual memory serves me. It's just I've never seen that. So I think that's what my project is seeking to do, is to just fill those gaps and to also make people question like who's allowed here, or like like I think visual memory contributes a lot to um thinking about who's allowed in certain spaces, and so I think subconsciously everyone might not think of bigger people as being included in those spaces.
Yeah, definitely. And I also think there's also a misconception about the perfect what is the perfect body form or the perfect physique. I think there's also a misconception because also too, just because you're thin doesn't mean that you're healthy as well. I think there's also a
Right.
huge kind of like misunderstanding, I think, in our culture because of the how you're talking about like what you're saying that all we see in popular culture is images of just like, people who are quote unquote like healthy and thin and just particularly portray this lifestyle, and which is really interesting. And so, which kind of, I'm also very interested in knowing, especially in your size photographic blueprint portraits, how do you think that creates, which I think you touched upon this already, the how does that create, you think, a sense of belonging in your work?
Well, I know that for me it's a photograph is like a final thing. Like it's like this is it. Like this is the image, and I think it creates this moment for reflection on the statement, like the final statement of like this person belongs here. This person is uplifted here, and I think, you know, the cyanotypes give like this abstracted kind of view into uh that concept without getting too specific. I think there's a good, like a really good opportunity for cyanotypes to express that kind of universality, because the portraits are not necessarily film negatives. They're the figures are placed on the surface of the cyanotype, creating silhouettes. So it's shapes that we're looking at, and it's not necessarily, a specific person type. It's a body shape, and I think that plays a lot into like the connection to nature, because, you know, it just kind of blends in. Like it's a universal truth that like these shapes belong here. And like it I think it just plays more into allowing people to not specify so much, but still kind of gets the point across that like these bodies are here.
Yeah, and it's something very ethereal about the way that they're depicted as well. They almost seem to be floating, or they almost seem to be in midair, or maybe even underwater as well, which lends itself to the style, the blueprint style, of the
Hmm.
portraits. And this is, I guess, a two-part question, but how does it? I guess this is the second part of that question. How does it amplify the message of inclusion? You think the color of blue, for example?
Well, I think the blue takes people somewhere else. Like photographs are usually either black and white or color, and people's familiarity with photographs is already set. Especially everyone has access to their phone and taking pictures, and um but I think cyanotypes have this ability to make it like take it to a different world, a different space. And being from South Florida, a lot of times, like you said, with the underwater, some people look like some of the figures look like they're underwater.
Mhm.
that like kind of happened, but it's true, and it kind of, I feel like it connects because that blue of the cyanotype kind of connects with like nature too, with the blue of the ocean. So specifically for this project, I feel like that kind of just it's very cohesive for the project itself to kind of blend those two things to like make sure it's known that like they're together. These two things are together. Ocean, people are one.
Yeah, it creates this sense of rhythm throughout the series of cyanotypes, which is really, yeah, really super interesting the way that they're depicted, the figures themselves, as well as the color and the process. Which I also wanted to the idea of blue as well, and kind of tying it to sort of sentimentality. I think also kind of helps it as well. The cyanotypes and I wanted to also ask about the way you incorporate found objects as well, and how that helps explore themes of family history and body positivity in your art. Can you talk more about that?
Yes. So like I kind of was saying about the cyanotypes, I think they give a different view of the image of, or the object or the like I work with found objects. I worked with found photography from my grandmother's archive. And it might not necessarily be like, oh, this is the picture, make a negative and here. I'm thinking about different themes that um collaging the pictures in a way to think about what is the memory that I'm actually trying to recreate or to invent or to reimagine this a memory. For instance, I had a piece with um pictures of my grandmother's hands and pictures of my hands and kind of in the same place doing different things like at the same time. And so for me, it just kind of creates like to build upon this archive of our family history, but in a way that like creates space for connection in a different timeline, in a different space.
Mm,
And some of the objects too, have a sense of sentimentality. And I don't think that, a lot of times when people are taking pictures of their family and going down that in a memory book, for instance, you wouldn't necessarily have these objects in your photo album, but these objects for me like create a sense of nostalgia and memory for growing up in a certain spaces, so like my mother, for instance, has had this like this prayer. I think every household has had like the same objects in their space. And they're just kind of there. But like if you were to move, like your mother would take these certain important objects, I would take certain important objects, and they just kind of move with you. And it's like that's how you know what space that is. This is mom's space because this is her prayer. She had like a serenity prayer on a glass panel. That's mom's space. You know what I mean? So I think what the cyanotypes do in that sense is to uplift kind of these mundane objects into these monuments kind of memory and of space to like hold down like this is mom's, this is hers, this is my grandmother's.
yeah, just hearing you speak about that really reminds me of objects and they're objected, but also to like the way that you recognize them as such. You know what I mean? Like when you, for example, they almost become like omens, or they also become like like these moments of truth. Like you see them, or for example, like if for example, like you are doing a task and then something with that object falls on the ground, it breaks. Like it really creates this sort of really interesting conceptual dynamic between the individual and the object, because then you start to build connection between that object that has it's broken, and in certain cultures when things break, that's a sign. It's a sign of being lucky, for example. I think, or a sign of something positive that to come in the future. Like I know that in certain cultures they add gold to like the saucers that break or like cups that break. So it's really interesting our relationship to objects. It's really profound, and it's really interesting to hear you talk about that because recently I thought about that. Like it became like a vivid kind of like concept that I couldn't sort of like get out of my head. But I also wanted to touch upon these ideas of how your these aspects of the universal aspects of identity and how the body image kind of comes into your place into your work because most of these are silhouettes of the cyanotypes of yourself, and I wanted to know how do those elements kind of come together to speak to both like the personal experience and the universal.
Oh, excuse me, because I have a cough, but
No, it's good.
um, so I think so the self-portrait kicked off this whole series. But then when I started thinking about it, I'm like, there's got to be other people who feel the same way. There's got to be other people who, for whatever reason, don't feel comfortable doing certain nature activities or they don't feel like they have a place out there. I mean, I know for me growing up, I was so nervous to like do anything nature wise or like physical wise because I didn't want to be made fun of. Like, I didn't want to be like the butt of the joke for the rest of the year at school or whatever. So
Mhm.
I would just not participate. So, that contributed to me thinking like, I'm sure there's other people who feel that way.
Hmm.
So then for me, what becomes a goal is to fix that. Like,
Right.
no, like stop. Like let's flip the page. Let's get people out into nature. Let's uplift them. And for me, in light of my experience, how can I help someone else have the same kind of experience? Like,
Yeah.
step out into the sun. Like, let's go. Let's go kayaking. Let's go for a picnic. Let's be outside, you know? And I just think a lot of people restrict themselves from doing that for whatever reason. But I know for me,
Hmm.
it has a lot to do with just being raised, not being outgoing because of that.
Yeah, definitely like that connection or that lack of connection that kind of you kind of form, I think. Yeah, definitely. You'd be surprised too. A lot of people, don't really go out to the Everglades much, and I totally understand. I mean, it's really kind of, I'll be concerned too for the wildlife, you don't want to get, attacked and things like that, which is concerning as well. But definitely that connection to nature, especially since we're right next to one of the most unique ecosystems in the world. I think it's a really special place and everybody should kind of like make it out there at least one time or just to see, just to take a boat ride or whatnot. But
Well,
your upbringing in South Florida. What did you wanna?
I just wanted to say one more thing because another contributing factor to all of this is it's not made for us sometimes. Physically, the structures that are made are not for big people. So that's another deterring factor of people wanting to participate because, for instance, there's like all these like little canoes or like, you know, if you go hiking, like you got to squeeze through this thing and squeeze through that tree and like
Hmm. Yeah.
I don't I think what is top of my mind is that people are not thinking about big people when they think about certain and that's across all society, but in nature in particular, you know, it's not thought of that this person might not fit through that space. And then what happens is that person like I'll just speak for myself that I'm just like, well, I'm not going. Like I can't do that. And I'm not gonna try because I'm not gonna be like put in that position. But everybody else can just go. You know what I mean? So like that's the kind of thing that I'm thinking about when I'm thinking about bringing other people into this project.
Yeah, like having more inclusivity in terms of the way things are like structures or architecture or just like engineering. Engineering is sort of kind of like thought about like the concepts between those ideas and those concepts. And I also wanted to bring the idea up of your upbringing in South Florida and how that has influenced the natural environment and the nostalgic elements in your artistic practice in process.
Well, that is another huge contributing factor to my work overall. We were talking about the Midwest a little bit, and I used to live in Chicago. Like I grew up in Miami, but I couldn't wait to get out of here at a certain point. And I went up to Chicago. I experienced all the seasons, and I was there for almost a decade, like 8 years. And I was like, I gotta go back home because it got too cold. And so when I came back home, I just remember thinking like, whoa, like my eyes opened in a different way. And that's kind of what ha like it just was like, why would I ever leave this place? It's a tropical paradise, right? And and so that kind of to me kind of kicked off this whole um nostalgic like family history, like documenting all these things because it reignited this sense of place and this sense of home
Mm,
that, when I came back home, it was like, oh, all these morsels that I took for granted are like actually a part of me and need to be amplified in some way.
yeah, no, definitely the lack, like the absence of being in Miami or Florida in certain places brings up this nostalgic quality, which is also too like I want to touch upon the spiritual connection in your work too, and how that intersects with your exploration of abstracted images and timelines.
Yeah, so I was thinking about this, and I think what happens for me is due to the nature of the process of cyanotypes, it kind of blended in that way because when you're outside in nature and you're making the work, there's this, you're out there and you're kind of in this element of this space that you don't really, a few things. You need the sun, you're going to be outside, and you're going to try to work on these things, right? And you bring all of this to the table. But then what happens in the interim is kind of that's for me like where the spirituality comes in because, you know, cyanotypes like are all about chance. Like you can plan as much as you want and you might get it right a few times here and there. But inevitably what happens is something you didn't expect happens. And while I'm waiting for things to process,
Hmm.
a butterfly comes by, right? Or like a bird is chirping. And I usually work in my backyard at my family's house, and like it's just teeming with all this activity in nature. So while I'm working, the process kind of allows for like all of that to happen. And I just kind of reflect on my ancestors, my grandmother. I reflect on my connection to nature and like
Hmm.
that's kind of where that spirituality comes in. It amplifies my beliefs, it amplifies my connection to my higher power, and it just like becomes this whole different process of connection. So that to me is like where it all comes together. And you know, when I'm doing like when I'm working with myself and nature, it's a personal connection. When I'm working with other people in workshops and whatnot, it like brings that even more to me. Just like being able to share in that energy. And so yeah, I mean other people might not feel that, but I do. So like I always I started adding that into my bios and stuff because that's what happens, that's what happens.
Yeah, you don't expect certain things to occur. You try to, like you said, you try to prepare as best as you can, and sometimes those being vulnerable, like you just become very vulnerable, I think, in those moments. And I also wanted to kind of ask you about your artist in residence at the Hypatia-in-the-Woods and StoneTriggerPress studio. How did that shape your creative practice and influence your recent exhibitions?
Well, I was very grateful for those two residencies because both of them were in rural communities. And um, by the time that I got to the Abiquiu, New Mexico, the Stone Trigger Press residency, I had already been through the experience of Hypatia in the Woods. So I was kind of slowed down. Like that's what these two residencies just gave me this opportunity to slow down, to see new landscapes, to connect with new people. Um, and it really did give me this opportunity to reflect upon how my practice, like how do I want to run my practice? Like how do I want to conduct myself in terms of productivity and research and time, and it really kind of slowed me down, which it was really beneficial because when I got out there, I was kind of in hustle mode. Miami and like things keep moving fast, fast, fast. Everything is, there's a show, there's like five shows every weekend, there's like so many things going on and
Yeah.
there's so many grants and there's so many things to apply for. And I got caught up in that. You know what I mean? Like it just, let's do it, let's do it, let's do it. Everything, 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 everything. And then like these two residencies kind of gave me this like calm down. Like it all doesn't have to be done today or right now. Like so my approach to my practice today is very like slow,
Hmm.
and sometimes that is very uncomfortable because you see other people kind of grinding and like it gets more and more comfortable, but I know for me personally, I I need to slow down in order to like digest and think about the ideas that I'm trying to present, the process, the people that I'm including. And so that's what it kind of did for me. It slowed me down and it turned my practice into something that was less, you know, like hustle, grind oriented,
Yeah.
and get the thing, get the thing, get the thing, to just like, can I just create? Can I just make work?
Yeah. Do you think did you experience that while you in your educational journey, like that fast-paced sort of environment, work environment with your BFA or your in 2008 or your MFA in 2020? How did that shape your evolution as of your artistic
Hmm.
practice approach to science?
Well, those came before my current practice, but um I will say that I was better, more so with my MFA. I was more interested in experimenting with everything that I could possibly get my hands on because I had had this gap between my undergrad and my graduate studies. And so I was kind of re-finding out who I am, re-finding out like what kind of art am I going to do? Because I just thought I was a painter originally, and I thought, well, like that's who I am, right? I'm gonna keep painting these paintings. And it wasn't hitting, you know what I mean? It wasn't doing much. And so that experimentation in grad school, like I took all these different classes, history, photography, um, printmaking, fiber arts, and that's kind of where cyanotypes got introduced to me, was in grad school. So then, that kind of made me like, I was like so excited to have found that, and that got me going on my cyanotype journey. Um,
That's really
but I
nice.
wouldn't necessarily say that there was hustle culture. There was a lot of like experimentation that happened. Um, but it was all good, you know what I mean? It was like it was well paced. I think what happens is
Mhm.
there's some kind of, I don't know, no one ever told me this. Maybe they did.
Right.
But you got to do this, you got to do that. I think it's kind of in my head. I see other people doing stuff and I'm like, I need to do that. And it's like, wait, do you want to do that? Like,
Well, I just want to quickly just let you know. So, do you have anything else coming up, or I just want to end on that note? I really thank you for being here. I really appreciate it very much. Let
I
us.
think, yeah, I thank you too. Thank you for your time. I'm going to be continuing my series at Deering Estate this year. So, April 13th is going to be open studios. Also, it's a seafood festival. So come on by to Deering Estate April 13th from 10 to 5, and I'll be in my studio and you can hear more about this project.
Great. Thanks again.
Thank you.